viewer contributions make local programming possible on WNIN. Become a member of WNIN with your contribution so we can continue to make this programming available. Visit WNIN.org and click on the donate button.
In recent weeks, there have been several silver alerts in our area. On this week's WNIN Newsmakers, we'll learn more about how alerts are issued at the state level, how local authorities handle alerts, and learn some tips on how to interact with someone with dementia. WNIN Newsmakers is up next. Welcome to WNIN Newsmakers. I'm April Nading. Most people think that missing person alerts are controlled locally, but actually they are issued at the state level. Angie Meacham, director of the Indiana Clearinghouse for Missing Children and Endangered Adults, joins us to talk about how alerts are assessed and issued. Thank you, Angie, for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about the Indiana Clearinghouse for Missing Children and Endangered Adults. It's part of the Indiana State Police. How does this work?
Sure. So we are an analytical division of the Indiana State Police. We're civilians. We're not police officers, but we specialize in missing persons. And we are the folks that control the amber alerts, silver alerts, blue alerts, and green alerts in Indiana.
So what exactly constitutes a missing person?
So for adults, it means someone who would normally know their whereabouts cannot locate them. And that could be due to a nefarious act, or that could just be because they don't want to be found. And that person can then report them as a missing person. As a child, it is different. So if they're under the age of 18, it has to be the legal guardian of that child. So that could be the parent, that could be Department of Child Services if they're a ward of the state, but it has to be the legal guardian.
So, we see on TV all the time that they have to be missing for 48 hours or something like that. Is that part of the criteria?
Absolutely not. So there is no waiting period in the state of Indiana. Matter of fact, nationwide, there typically is not any type of waiting period. The sooner that the reports are made, the better chances are that we're going to find that person.
So going back to the adults, I guess anybody could report them missing then, a coworker, friend, relative?
Absolutely. Anybody who knows their normal routine and they're not there. So even a coworker or a workplace report is really great because it shows they're not doing what they normally do in their daily life.
So then what happens? I mean, you guys get this report and then what are you doing?
So those reports are going to come through local law enforcement. Local law enforcement should then be entering them into both state and federal databases so that if they get located anywhere in the United States, they'll be contacted as a local agency. Now, we get involved at the request of those local agencies.
And then what will you do?
So if we get requested to assist, for instance, as an alert, or maybe they need analytical assistance, we provide what we can for that agency. So if, for instance, they need a person from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, we will get them a representative for that group. If they're looking for someone from the Michigan State Police, we're going to get them that person. So we do a lot of navigation for those local agencies to make sure that they're networked properly. And also then we take a look at it. Does this meet the requirements for any of our alerts?
Well, in talking about alerts, a lot of people are familiar with Amber Alerts, but can you talk about how those are issued and the criteria that must be met for you to issue one statewide?
Absolutely. And that is mandated by Indiana law. So Amber Alerts are very specific. They have to be under the age of 18. It has to be an abduction or thought to be an abduction, and the child has to be in serious danger. So we're either looking at that child being hurt or killed within a short amount of time. So we want to make sure we're meeting all those requirements. It has to be recommended by a law enforcement agency. We also have to have enough descriptive information to ensure that whatever we put out in the media release is enough that people would be able to recognize the victim as well as the suspect.
How does someone tell for sure that they are in that kind of danger?
I think, honestly, it's that heart to heart feeling when your gut tells you that something's wrong and you see something happening. They always say, you see something, say something. It's the same way. When you see something that's wrong with a child and you can see that they're in distress and someone has got their hands on them, by all means, call 911. It's better to be safe than sorry. We have a very, very high success rate in getting our children back in the state. And certainly with our Amber Alerts, in the last 5 years, we're at 100%, and we're very proud of that. And it's because people step up and they actually call 911 and say, I see this child or I see the suspect.
So how many Amber Alerts does Indiana have each year? I mean, I'm sure it varies, but
It varies. We take about 4 to 5 calls a year, but what we actually issue is maybe 2. We don't have a lot in the state, mainly because law enforcement does a fantastic job of intervention before we get to the Amber Alert status.
oh, that's good to know.
Absolutely.
What about silver alerts? What's the criteria for those to be issued?
So for a silver alert, a lot of people think first off that there's an age requirement, and there is not. So that changed 2018, 2019. Anyone can qualify for a silver alert if they meet the requirements as an endangered person or a high risk missing person. So, as an example, we try to use the mindset of could this person find their way home without law enforcement assistance? Would they be a danger to themselves or others, or would they be a danger to themselves or others if they're driving? So that's kind of what drives us to see if that person's going to qualify. So it might vary by age. For example, a 2-year-old, they're not going to find their way home by themselves. So they're going to qualify probably without any type of medical diagnosis just because they're not going to be able to do that on their own versus someone who's 50 with no medical diagnosis. We don't know why they're missing. They're probably not going to qualify for a silver alert until we can find some medical reason or a reason that they're missing.
And that makes sense. So silver alerts are not usually sent to mobile devices. I mean, why is it distributed differently than Amber Alerts?
Sure, the Amber Alert program is specifically because it's a criminal event. The Silver Alert is basically a guided media release so that we can ensure that we have extra eyes out there just looking for this person because they may not necessarily need help. They may have just decided that they wanted to leave their house.
Right.
At the same time, we want to make sure that if they do need help, that that's provided to them.
So how many silver alerts does Indiana usually have each year?
So we run anywhere between about 75 to about 150, give or take a couple. It really varies by year. Now we're down, so we've been kind of declining. COVID, it got a little bit higher, and now we've had a decrease.
And why do you think that is? That there's so many more silver alerts?
I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that there's a lot more attention. When you go on social media, you see a lot more about missing people. There's a lot more attention focused on it. People are out and about now that COVID is done as well. So they're realizing people aren't at work. They're realizing things are not the way they should be. So there's a lot more attention that's brought to someone if they're not in their normal routine.
So what are some of the other alerts that people may hear about?
Sure, we have blue alerts. Blue alerts is if a law enforcement officer has been seriously injured, is missing, or has been killed in the line of duty, and we're trying to find that suspect or that officer. That's also, it's always going to be a criminal act, just like an Amber Alert. And then we have our green alerts. And green alerts are basically the same as a silver alert, with the exception that it is just for an active service member and or a veteran that is missing.
So what would you want people to know about missing person alerts?
Yeah, the biggest thing is it's an eyes open alert. So open your eyes, give us a call, let us know what you see. It doesn't necessarily mean we need you to intervene. It means we need the information. We're looking for that person and we want to get them to safety.
So even if they're not sure, still err on the side of caution.
100%.
All right. Well, thank you so much for the information.
Thank you for having me today.
You're welcome. Joining us to discuss how local authorities handle alerts is Sergeant Anthony Aussieker, Public Information Officer for the Evansville Police Department. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So tell me about what happens when somebody calls the police department about a potential missing person.
So everything starts with patrol response. So our patrol officers will go out and take the initial report. So they're going to speak to the reporter. They're going to talk to anyone else that might be in the house. Like with a child, they need to know what time the child normally gets home from school or what any possible after school activities or anything like that. Gather as much information. You know, for, say, an endangered adult, they need to know any diagnoses, any mental capabilities or mental difficulties or diagnoses. So then they can determine whether they need to contact a detective and have them come out and further the investigation or if just a simple report would be taken. In those instances where a detective is called, they need to confirm those diagnoses. So they'll speak with an appropriate medical provider. So whether that's the primary care physician or a hospital or a mental health specialist to confirm that, because then they'll contact the clearinghouse to process that information, determine whether that alert's going to be given.
So I suppose certain things like medications that they're on, those things do go into play as far as...
Absolutely, especially if it's a medication that's a life-sustaining medication. So if it's something that they have to take on a regular basis to make sure that they survive, that's vital information, because if we start getting into the point where they're due for their next dose and they're not there to take that dose, that makes the risk factors increase tremendously.
And I suppose, you know, I've seen on some of the alerts where they'll even say like what they were wearing and stuff like that, that you need to pay attention. What did you put on your kid that morning, or what did they wear when they left?
Absolutely. That's very vital, and that's one of the key pieces of information when we contact the Indiana State to let them know that we need to maybe issue a potential alert is an up-to-date description of what that person was wearing and where they could possibly be, any vehicle description, more than just that they drive a white car. We want to know that they drive a white Hyundai with a license plate, any dents, anything that sticks out. You know, and then with children, you know, do they have a bright-colored backpack? Are they wearing a character-type shoe to school? Any of those intricate details, so then as a person driving by, they can make, oh, I remember that. So anything to draw more attention to this person we're trying to find.
So is the local police department who you should call first when something happens?
Absolutely, absolutely. Contact 911 for a missing or endangered person first.
And then you guys, like you said, you go through the other steps. So what is the process if the department feels like an Amber Alert or Silver Alert should be issued?
So it'll be similar. Our patrol officers are going to go out first. They're going to talk to that reporting party to determine, you know, what are the circumstances. When was the person last seen? Gather all that initial information. When they determine that it's an at-risk situation or a person that may potentially need to be put on an alert, they'll contact that detective, and then the detective, through their supervisors and through the Indiana Clearinghouse, will contact them with all the appropriate information. There's essentially a checklist that they'll go through to determine whether the alert is suitable, and then the state will issue that. During the process, they'll contact our records division as well. They will enter the missing person into what's called NCIC. It's a nationwide database. So then if any police officer in the United States runs that person's name, it'll show that they're missing from our local jurisdiction. So then they can contact us and let us know that they've had contact with them.
So how often does this happen, that people are calling about a missing child or adult?
It's kind of dependent on the time of year. During summer, when summer break first starts off, you know, kids are excited, they're celebrating, they're hanging out with friends, they're not really paying attention to times. So if they have say they have a curfew, they're supposed to be back home by 7. Well, they're having fun, they're playing, so they don't pay attention. So we get a lot of those then. And then even when school kind of starts back in, because again, they're maybe hanging out at the bus stop, they stopped at the park on their way home. So it's kind of seasonally dependent, but it does happen somewhat regularly. Thankfully, a majority of the time, it's a student or a child that, you know, maybe just didn't return on time. So it's not that they're missing, they're just not where they're supposed to be.
Right. They just are not paying attention. So I know we talked about earlier, Amber Alerts are sent to phones and Silver Alerts are not. So how do you distribute the information about the Silver Alerts?
So those are, like we would post on our social media pages and our Facebook pages and things like that. So then we get that information out as fast as possible. And then it is disseminated. You can, I believe through cell phone carriers, pick to allow those alerts to come through. Okay. So then they're distributed, and when those are entered, they can be sent out, and you can get an alert on your phone. You know, when you hear that loud tone, letting you know that there's some type of an alert to be aware of.
So how helpful are those alerts?
They're incredibly helpful. The more information we can get out, the fastest is incredible. So if we can send, especially in our local community, if we can send information to Henderson, Kentucky, you know, Posey County, Warwick County, Gibson County, to those surrounding counties and get that information out in a timely manner, if that person is in a vehicle or they may be traveling, we're able to get those people on board and get those eyes out there, so then we can hopefully find this person as soon as possible.
So from what you're saying, there aren't that many alerts. And so I'll confess, I don't think I have it set up on my phone to get alerts, because I can't tell you that I've ever received one. But it sounds like I should, and it's not like I'm going to be inundated with text all the time.
No, it's not. As far as an Amber or Silver Alert, it's not a regular occurrence, especially down here. Like I said, thankfully, a majority of the time, these individuals, adult or child, they're located rather quickly.
So are there any local good outcomes of Silver Alerts that you could share?
Off the top of my head, I can't think of any, but again, it kind of goes back to that situation where when we go out on these runs, what's called a BOL can be put out for this person. That's a be on the lookout. And dispatch will disseminate that to all of our officers that have a working computer in their car. They'll also send it to surrounding counties. And that is incredibly effective because then all of our officers know to be looking for this described person to where ultimately they're located before the need arises to send it to a nationwide alert.
Well, how important are regular people when they get alerts? How important is, them, are they getting that information and then reporting it? How important is that to the investigation?
Those are always important, and I've always said that no investigation is solved by the police work alone. It's always in conjunction and help with our community. So in those situations where we put out the information, or say we posted on our Facebook page that this person was last seen in a specific area, we start getting messages on our Facebook page and phone calls almost immediately. Hey, I think I saw that person at, say, Green River and Lynch. So an officer will go by there and check. Or I recognize this person, they normally frequent this area. That's all information that we may not get during that initial call, call for service. So those are places that our investigators, our officers can follow up on immediately.
And that's, and like you said, that helps bring a successful conclusion.
Absolutely.
What would you want people to know about the process of finding missing people?
Share information. Share information. Never assume that we already know what you have to share. So many times we've heard people say, well, I thought you guys would know this. Well, there are so many times that there are a lot of people that have information that one little piece of information may be all we need to find one of these people that are missing. So if you have information, call us. Again, you can contact us through Facebook. I will say that our Facebook page is not monitored 24/7. So call 911, call Central Dispatch, get an officer to check and confirm the information that you have to share.
Well, I think sometimes we get a little tainted by crime shows on on television, and where they poo-poo people calling in and giving information, and that's really actually very important.
It is, and that's an awful portrayal of how we as law enforcement, especially in the local community, and our Central Dispatch, they do a fantastic job, especially in a situation like this, of sharing information and helping the caller understand that every piece of information is important. Our detectives are great. They work very hard, and they would be more thankful for a lot of information, even if they don't need every little piece of it, than not having enough.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Good information.
Thank you.
Now we're joined by Dr. Morgan Phillips, a community educator for the Alzheimer's Association, with some tips on how to interact with someone with dementia. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. We appreciate it.
So what is your role as a community educator?
So as a community educator, I normally go out and do some of our specialty programming, whether it's knowing the 10 signs or support group facilitation for caregivers. It's really about making sure community members know how to best handle, help, and kind of secure the safety of their loved ones with Alzheimer's and related dementias.
So when there's been a silver alert issued and you think you may see the subject of the alert, what should you do?
Really, anytime there's a silver alert, you always want to be, as a community member, on guard, just because it could be anywhere around you. But in particular, there are 3 things that any community member wants to make sure they're doing. So first and foremost, recognize the signs of Alzheimer's and related dementias, and I'll go through those in just a moment. Second, you want to make sure you introduce yourself and address appropriately if you think that someone is in need or disoriented in the community. And then third, and easily the most important, take action. So the first one, recognizing those signs, really anything that's standing out. I strongly encourage anyone in the community, trust your gut. If it's 110 degrees outside and someone is walking around in a 3-layer jacket, that might be cause for concern, especially if they're of advanced age, or it looks like they don't know where they're going. They might be lost or disoriented. Another thing is you want to look out for is if there is a strange amount of agitation, if they are potentially speaking to themselves, if it seems like they're looking at the same signs, walking back and forth, but they can't seem to really get it together. That's going to be something that stands out. Once you see that, provided you can ensure safety for yourself, that really is key, you want to go up to them and engage like you would anyone in the community. With a level of patience, you want to introduce yourself by name, and usually if you're going to ask questions, small amounts of questions that are yes or no. So for example, if I'm out on Sycamore and I see someone standing disoriented at the light, I'm not going to say, oh my goodness, are you lost? Do you need help? What do you need? I'm going to go up to them. I'm going to say, hey, I'm Morgan. Looks like you might be a little lost. What's your name? And then we're going to go from there. And then in a perfect world, if everyone is safe and I'm feeling like, okay, they need help, I'm always going to make sure I contact emergency services. So I'm going to contact the police, I'm going to call 911, and I'm going to say, hey, I think we might have someone, especially if they're part of a silver alert, that is lost and disoriented. Here's where we are, and I'm watching them now. As long as you're able to maintain safety, you want to try your best to keep them around, keep them engaged until law enforcement or the proper professionals can come and intervene. The key piece, again, is safety. If you can't ensure safety, then sometimes it has to simply be enough to contact law enforcement and say, hey, they're at this corner, I didn't feel safe to intervene, but you need to get there soon.
Or even if you're trying to get them to stay and they refuse.
Yes.
I mean, I guess obviously you're going to call law enforcement, but are there any other tips on trying to maybe get them to hang out?
Yeah, generally, we never advise for community members to restrain, ever. If you've got someone who seems disoriented and they want you to leave them alone and they're pushing you away perhaps or walking away, we're not going to wrap our arms around them and stop them from leaving. What we do want to do, though, try to engage as peacefully and calmly as possible, because generally people give you what they get. If they can sense that you're a nervous wreck and you're talking a mile a minute, that's what they're going to give you. I've worked in Alzheimer's care for many years, and when you're working with someone with any type of dementia, you're going to be a mirror. You're going to reflect. And so if you come up to them calmly, you engage them, ask them questions about themselves, that can usually get them pretty toned down. If you can't, worst case scenario, again, trust your gut. I'm not going to illegally restrain some individual walking near a bus, but I'm also not going to stand on the corner of Sycamore and watch them get hit by the bus.
Right.
And so that's really, I think, what I always want to tell a community member is trust your gut, trust your instinct. If you think someone is in imminent danger, do what you have to do to the best of your judgment, and then we kind of sort it from there. Because it's always easier to act rather than to react. And if we're reacting, it's often far too late. With a silver alert, as I'm sure people maybe don't know, once we hit the 24-hour mark, it's a 50% chance of serious and grievous injury or death. And then once we get past a day, it's pretty grim. So if you think someone is in danger, and especially if they're on a silver alert, intervene now. Don't wait to react.
What are your thoughts on, let's say if you see someone and they're kind of confused, but you're able to have a conversation about getting them in the car with you or anything like that? What do you think on that?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is going to be situational dependent. If I'm in the middle of Poseyville and there's no one around and it's dark and it's storming, I'm not going to leave them in the middle of a field.
Sure.
But generally speaking, for most of our community members in the tri-state, you really don't want to be taking someone out of the area. You want to stay with them. I will say from experience, it's easy to lose a loved one who might be struggling with Alzheimer's or related dementia. It could be that Mrs. Jones just walked to the restroom and her husband was holding her purse for just a moment and he wandered off. And so now if you take him in your car and say, oh, we're going to bring you to the police station, Mrs. Jones comes out of the restroom terrified that her husband's missing.
Right.
So you really don't want to remove them. You want to try your best to ensure safety, stay with them until law enforcement or the proper professionals come along.
One reason why I threw that out there is because my mother did that once when she found someone who was disoriented. And of course, as she's telling me the story later, I'm like, you did what?
Yeah, you can't, I'm never going to hold it against them for caring.
Right. So since you're here, what are some of the signs of dementia that people should be aware of?
Well, there are several. There are 10 signs in all, and just for the sake of time, I would encourage people, if they want to know all of them, go to alz.org, alz.org, and go through that. But definitely two of the ones that I would definitely encourage people to be familiar with. So first and foremost, any time that activities of daily living are starting to kind of take a back seat. And what I mean by that is if my mom, if she has been getting up and making coffee every day, feeding the dog, paying the bills, and suddenly now she doesn't remember how to turn on her coffee machine. She's forgetting where she put the dog's food. She's getting disoriented on her way to the pharmacy that she's been going to for 46 years. Something is definitely something is not going the way it needs to go. We need to get that checked. Doesn't necessarily mean, oh my goodness, she has Alzheimer's. Does mean we need to address what's happening. Another thing is if there's any sort, and I would often say it's the phone call, and since you mentioned, your mother helping somebody, I will say as a caregiver, that dreaded phone call, and a lot of people listening right now, they can relate to this. It's that first time you get a phone call that says, hey, your mom is here at the pharmacy, and she thinks she has a prescription, but she hasn't been here in years. We knew we should call you. That's a terrifying moment, and that's really a key sign is when your loved one is no longer oriented to time, place. They are going places that they don't have any connection to. They're losing their way home. They're forgetting that they've already done this 3 times. They're telling you a story and they're rehashing the same details for the 11th time in 20 minutes. Some of that can be age-related, but generally what we tell people is that with age-related cognitive decline, that's going to be more about kind of the superficial things. So maybe I tell Dad that I'm going to go to Donut Bank, but he thought I said Starbucks. That's not a huge deal. If, however, Dad forgets my name, that is a huge deal, because that is a very cemented memory that he's no longer accessing. So anytime that we're seeing activities of daily living go by the wayside and or they're losing their track, they're losing space in a conversation, they're not able to track with you anymore, we really want to get that checked out. It could be severe stress, it could be Alzheimer's, but whatever it is, we've got to get that checked out.
What are you supposed to do when you find out, when you do start suspecting that someone has dementia? Because it's not easy to get them to go somewhere and have it checked. And then I also know this from personal experiences, they don't like hearing that.
Yeah, it's difficult. I will freely attest. It is difficult. The first thing you want to do, you want to come at it as calmly and coolly as you reasonably can. Realistically, a lot of people with Alzheimer's disease, they're going to be diagnosed years after they've already shown the first symptoms. And there's a very simple explanation for that. As someone who had family members who succumbed to Alzheimer's, you don't want to see it.
No.
No one wants to see it.
There's a lot of denial.
Yes, 100%. You never want to have to even for a moment think, my loved one has a terminal brain disease. I don't want this. So we explain away their behavior. And so if I have a loved one where I say, okay, I'm kind of worried, what do I do? It's just like a community member that's seeing someone who's lost and disoriented. We're going to be calm. We're going to say, here's what's going on. How can I help? We're going to slowly introduce the idea of intervention. One thing that I have found that can work really well, work alongside the existing medical providers. So instead of going to mom, dad, whoever, and saying, we need a full geriatric workup, and I think you have Alzheimer's. No. Don't start the conversation like that. It could be something as simple as, hey, at your next appointment, can I go with you? And then when you do, take your GP aside, say, hey, I'm a little worried, here's what's going on. They have screening, we have assessments, we have referrals, and sometimes coming from a third party that isn't my son or daughter or my spouse makes it a little more palatable to be able to be willing to go, to get assessed, to see what we're dealing with. Another thing you can do, always be planning ahead for Alzheimer's disease. Realistically, everyone is going to be impacted in some way, whether personally or whether through community members. So the way we engage with others, making sure that we maintain safety, making sure that we check in on our loved ones regularly, making sure that we pay attention. So this goes back to like a silver alert. First thing I would tell somebody is prepare for when they wander. Not if they will wander, when
but when
they
it's
will.
going to happen.
Yes, when they will wander.
So tell me again, where's a good place to go for information?
Yes, alz.org, alz.org.
Okay, thank you so much for your information.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thanks to all of our guests for helping us understand more about silver alerts and interacting with people with dementia. I'm April Nading. Thanks for watching WNIN Newsmakers.